Would you believe it? We're almost halfway through September. And this, I think, will be the last time I will get to greet you in this particular venue. I may have an opportunity to greet you face to face, masked or distanced, but nonetheless, this will be the last time that I speak to you. Next, in the following week, one of my colleagues, a wonderful priest, Pat Johnson, will take over the duties of pastoral care and work with you towards the shared ritual and the shared services that I hope will happen soon. I don't know what that will look like, but in my heart I know it will happen. I'm hoping that we'll be together at least by Christmas. Maybe the tree will have to be 6 feet away from us anyway. Whatever may turn out, my prayer is that as your journey continues, my journey will continue with you, that you will find the best way to be the people of God together again in a place of worship. This is also the last time you'll have to put up with me drawing on Matthew, the Gospel of the Church, I mentioned in August. It was Matthew's way of using the wisdom of Jesus and applying his wisdom to a community in a similar circumstance, one under threat, one in crisis, one very isolated, and trying to find ways to tell the community that our Lord understood very well the issues that arise in community and how to best embody God's grace. Dealing, like last week we talked about conflict, before that Peter being called Satan because he wanted to avoid a crisis, and so on and so forth. Well, this week, maybe the best is left for the last, we get to consider what Jesus has to say about forgiveness. Again, it's Peter that poses a question. We've just heard Jesus talking about how to deal with conflict in community, and Peter, following on that illustration, says, well, how often do I have to forgive somebody that I've fallen out with? Now understand that when Peter says 7 times forgiveness, he felt he was being very generous. And maybe that was the way the law prescribed it. Well, you've got to at least forgive somebody 7 times. I don't know, in my own life I have a hard time making 7, but I should be able to do better than that. Before I tell you Jesus' response, I should point out that Jesus takes what is considered socially prescribed, turns it completely on its head, and sets a whole new standard for community and forgiveness. And his answer, which is so familiar to most of us, is not 7, but 70 times 7. Now, 70 times 7 is a kind of a mathematical puzzle. It really means boundless, never-ending, infinite. And he's saying you never stop forgiving. Never stop forgiving. That is the attitude that we have to go into life with. I know the church hasn't done well historically on that whole aspect of forgiveness. I don't mean by that being a doormat, but I do mean by recognizing the humanity in other people and how they too may fail. But we've been pretty good about judgment. Well, that's not our job, that's God's job. And if you look at the parable from this week's gospel, you discover that yes, God does judge the slave who does not forgive when he could have. Well, that's not really the punchline of the parable. What Jesus is telling us is not how to forgive. He's telling us not that we should be judging, but he's telling us why we should forgive. And the main theme in the story is that the servant is called to forgive because he has experienced forgiveness. And that's why we forgive. We forgive because we've been forgiven. Now, the thought I'd like to leave you with, or maybe the sense I'd like to leave you with, is to remember the last time you were forgiven. What did that feel like? What was it like? There was a whole burden lifted. Maybe the guilt had gone away. Maybe the person who had forgiven you realized that they also had let go of some of the toxic and angry feelings in that act of forgiveness. That's wonderful stuff. That's divine stuff. So if you can sort of hang on to that thought, what it feels like to be forgiven, then taken from there, would that not be a feeling or an attitude that you would like to pass on to somebody else? Would that not be a gift that you would like to give to somebody else? That gift of relief, that gift of a burden raised, that gift of toxic and dark thoughts and feelings being swept away. As we get closer together, as we begin to share our ritual again, as we see each other face to face, my prayer for the community is that you will continue to embody the kind of community that Matthew was trying to engender through Jesus' words, and truly be a forgiving and a reconciling and a grace-giving community. That's my prayer. Blessings for the weeks ahead.
You know, in the repertoire for organ, transcriptions hold a special place. By transcription in music, we mean a piece of music that was written for one instrument or instrumental group, and then is changed and rewritten to suit another instrument. The piece I'd like to play for you today is such a piece. It was written originally by the Italian composer Benedetto Marcello. He was inspired by the words of Psalm 19, "The heavens declare the glory of God." Marcello wrote a setting for orchestra and soprano, and this has been transcribed for the organ, and it's a really exciting piece. It suits the organ so well. You'll see the contrast between this bottom keyboard, which is the full sound of the organ, and the third keyboard up, which is a brighter, sparkly sound that actually, if you were in the church, you would hear that it comes from the back of the church and the main organ comes from the front. So here is a transcription of Benedetto Marcello, "The heavens declare the glory of God."